Well, today, first of all, I want to start out by saying, we've been trying this last Sunday of the month collaborative preaching thing. And next month is October 30th, and there's a sheet over there if you'd like to participate next month. Actually, this month, it's a story of Zacchaeus climbing up in the tree, so I'm sure all of you have great insight in that. I want to thank the people who responded this time. Paul Royer and one of his friends on Facebook responded. Several former church members that I know in various parts of the world. Jim and Linda Ditzler, Chris Merrick, Linda Barno, Joanne Orr, Dennis Mataro, and Chris Hyden. And there also was one that was turned in, and it was titled Anonymous. So I'm not sure if that was a mole or something or what, but anyway, a lot of people contributed, and we want to credit each of you for your work. Now, as is often the case, Jesus' parable of the rich man and Lazarus is a literary invention designed to grab our attention. A lot of people will think that the parables were history, or they wanted it to be so, or there was a real person like this or like that. But this is just a way that Jesus teaches by creating these scenarios and helping us to put ourselves into them. And so, since the beginning of writing, people have written stories about someone who's traveled to the underworld and has come back with some important knowledge for humanity. And that is a theme here. Don't we always want to talk to someone who has died and who has come back and find out their experience? And that's the hook. That's Jesus' hook in this parable. The other thing we need to say at the outset, as we discussed a little bit privately, is that this in no way is intended to be a literal description of the afterlife. It's a scenario. And we want to wonder if we get stuck identifying with only one character in the parable. If we can only identify as the rich man, or we can only identify as Lazarus, or we can only identify as Abraham, then there's probably something wrong with the way we're looking at it, and we're not turning it to realize that there are times we're Lazarus. There are times when we're the rich man, and this is about all of us. So there are a lot of details in our story today. The gate, the chasm, the dog, and 4 people wrote lengthy articles about the dog. Okay, Art Linkletter, wasn't it? He said he wouldn't work with children or dogs because they stole the stage all the time. So maybe we ought to tell Jesus, don't put a dog in the scenario because it's going to steal the show. Because everybody knows that animals are therapeutic, right? They're therapeutic. They seem to always have this sense when something's wrong with you. And the dog in this story is on the bottom. How much further could you get than to be a stray dog? And this stray dog, in his lostness, is one of the heroes of the character. Provides comfort and community for Lazarus. We could ask the question, where are the chasms that divide people? We could talk about all the gates and all the walls that are built around the world. But his storyline is basically a reversal story. Lazarus starts out in one position, and the rich man ends up in the same position that Lazarus was in. It's a reversal story. We could dwell on the purple, the linen, and the feast, and talk about benefiting from the labor of other people. All of these are worthy explorations, but they're all the side streets of the parable today. And I hope right now to go to the main highway. So what is the point of the parable on Main Street? Well, first of all, Jesus was a rabbi. And in the rabbinic tradition, there were many parables about someone named Lazarus. And Abraham had a trusted servant and spiritual person named Eliezer, which in Greek is Lazarus. And so there was this legendary material about how this Lazarus would be sent back to earth by Abraham so that Lazarus could come back and report about how the people of Israel were fulfilling the Torah and their covenant with God. especially the times when the Torah talked about the treatment of the widow, the orphan, and the poor. And so this seems to be a classic story where Jesus is using a convention of the day. He was laid at the rich man's gate. See? By who? By Abraham? As a test? Probably. We all know this story. Does anybody know what this is? The Biltmore. I had a friend who several years ago went to see the Biltmores, Asheville, North Carolina. He had this big, thick book, and he went through it and was showing all the rooms. And he was just completely fascinated by the Biltmore. And we might kind of think about how fascinated we are with our homes and about building things and the Vanderbilt family. But we also think about the Rockefeller family. We think about the Gilded Age, and we know that the Vanderbilt family and the Rockefeller family were no strangers to tragedy. And the realities of their life were no different from anyone else's. I also found this. Does anybody know where that comes from? You've probably been there. Almost everybody in this room, I guarantee, has been there. It's about maybe. Stan Hewitt, the Cybermensch. Remember that? They have a Latin saying that's over the front of the home. This is the front of the home where you enter in. It's in Latin, and it says, "Not for us alone." See? They created that as a community place and as the image for the community. So we can't have these stereotypes about why we create these things. But, you know, these structures didn't add to the actual quality of their lives. If you read about the Kennedys and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Cybermensch and the Howard Hughes or the fictional Gatsby, we know that they're under the same spiritual conditions as everyone else. And the irony of Jesus' parable is the most important question in life. It's about what people believe to be. And our culture initiates us into this quest and this fascination with fame and fortune. So here's the key to the whole parable. What kind of a response was Abraham hoping for from this man at the end of his life? I think it probably was something like this. Oh my God, I didn't realize that Lazarus was suffering so badly on my very doorstep. What can I do now? Wouldn't you expect that to be the response maybe that Abraham was looking for? Maybe repentance of some sort? Except in this story anyway, in Jesus' version of this story, this rich man doesn't turn. Instead of turning outward, he turns further inward, which is never good. And he turns back into his own self-pity, his own self-indulgence. And he even says, "Have pity on me." Now, after he's seen what Lazarus went through, have pity on me? So someone said, wouldn't it be nice if there was a Scrooge view of this parable? That the rich person was so shocked after being confronted with the ills of Lazarus and his uncaring behavior that he chose to repent. He chose to embrace a new life of joy and giving. But just listening to Moses didn't have enough impact. Just speaking to Abraham did not have enough impact. And this is perhaps the most annoying aspect of this man's story. Even in torment, he can't remove the veil of his own superiority. And he believes that he can still order Lazarus around. He says something like, "Will you send that chump Lazarus to dip his hand in the pool down there? And I'm a little bit thirsty here." That chump Lazarus doesn't have anything better to do. He doesn't do anything worthwhile. He doesn't need to enjoy those comforts of heaven. Lazarus is still a chump. His only worth is from his utility, from what he can contribute to the economy. And any society needs to beware whenever a person's worth is measured solely by what they can contribute to the economy. And we need to be careful not to treat people according to their utility to us, according to how they're valuable to us, and whether they met our expectations or whether we were expecting something for them. We need to be very careful that we treat people as they are and not as what they can do for us. This guy's not done. He says, well, if I can't get a drink, then go to my brother's. There's still a problem with his thinking. He's not concerned about the big picture. Think about this big picture. This is a whole world of suffering, dying people. Is the whole cosmos unjust? Are there more people like Lazarus out there? How can we prevent this kind of thing from happening elsewhere? Think about all the Lazaruses that have ever been. Think about when you've been Lazarus. He doesn't go there. He goes deeper in. He is still trying to broker an insider deal for his own family and his brothers with someone that he knows is in power. Imagine that. This is the same spirit that cornered the market on $2 EpiPens and resold them for $600. This is the same spirit that ran a sewer line through the Canaanite family cemetery and endangered the water supply of all the people who lived there, despite agreements to the contrary. This is the same spirit of the person who hedged their bets on both sides of mortgages so that it was more profitable to foreclose and create a homeless family than to allow them to stay in their own home. And the attitude of the rich man, if it can teach us anything, it can teach us about privilege in America and how economic inequality is the red flag of every society. And the poor are the canary in the cage. And the question of every civil society is, how are we caring for those people who are most vulnerable? How are we respecting human dignity? And that's the number one issue in our country today. And it's difficult for me to see people die from preventable diseases. And I see it all the time in our breakfast program. I see children who live with nothing, who have so little stability in their lives that they will never come close to the potential that God birthed them with. So how can we praise any achievements that any of us have? How can we brag about anything when we live in a world of Lazaruses? I say, you know what? It's not even Head Start. It's not even start. It's just a little better start. So our way of valuing success and failure is not God's way. We need to say that about this parable. They have Moses and the prophets. Listen to them. The world is full of religious traditions, and we like to make a lot of the differences in those religious traditions, but basically they say the same thing. And this parable raises a very interesting question. Why don't people listen to their religious traditions? Why does it take an experience like this to move them? There are over 300 verses in Hebrew Scripture which talk about helping the poor and the widow and the stranger. And do we hear about those when we talk about religion in our culture today? What's wrong? That we don't pay attention to the weightier matters of the law. Here's the punchline. Take a look at those guys up there. Who is that guy? Know that actor's name? Ebenezer Scrooge. One of the very older ones. There's also a guy named Carl Menninger. Some of you may know, a great psychologist. Mid-20th century, something like that. And he said that if you don't have joy in life, go out and find someone to help. That was his psychological advice. If you're not finding joy, if you're not experiencing joy in life, go out and find someone to help. And then I also found this great quote: love cures people, both the ones who give it and the ones who receive it. That's very true. I also want to show this because it's an example of how we're Lola, what's the word for it? What are we doing in the library? We're weeding. Culling. We're looking for a good adjective for what we're doing in the library. Basically, we're getting rid of all the books that have never been checked out. Okay, that's one criteria. There's this great book, Albert Schweitzer, and I took a picture of it on my table. They thought he was mad. Now, for those of you who are younger here today, in the days when this was written in the 1950s, when people said they were mad, they didn't mean they were angry. They meant they were suffering from distorted thinking. And why did people say Albert Schweitzer was suffering from distorted thinking? Because he had a doctorate in medicine, music, theology, and philosophy. He had things pretty well in Europe. And there were 11 sentences in the Bible that changed his mind, changed his life. And those 11 sentences we read today. It's a parable of the rich man and Lazarus. He heard those words on a Good Friday. And those words transformed the way he looked at life. There's a story about when one time he came to America. 1949, after the war, he was able to leave. And he came to America just so that he could share his story, to spread some goodwill, and to talk about what was happening there and what the needs were there. And there's a story about a big fanfare of people from New York who met him at the train station. The mayor and a few other prominent dignitaries from the city. And as they were greeting him, he looked around and he took off running in that direction. And he went and he ran and he helped a woman get her bags off of the train and into a bus. And then he ran back to the dignitaries and he said this: I saw an opportunity to bring joy. He changed his life. So when we're following Jesus, we have to have different eyes. When we're following Jesus, we have to have different ears. What you see, what you don't see. What you expect, what you don't expect. Now think about this. Think about Albert Schweitzer. I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know, the only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve. Going back to our key thing here. Look at the difference in that guy's face. The rich man really was not rich. He missed out on so many blessings. He missed out on joy. He missed out on love. He missed out on community. He missed out on connection. He missed out on grace. And the thing that changed Albert Schweitzer, and the thing that he realized, was that this was a parable that Jesus told about himself. That just as in the Hebrew world, Lazarus was laid by the gate, broken down and in need, so also Jesus is laid down at the gate every time we see a need in the world. Even if someone rises from the dead. So here's the three things. We're all about embracing and celebrating God's love, which includes creating caring community, which includes that people have a right to goodwill from us. So how is Luke 16 good news to you? You don't have to be a Scrooge anymore. People treated Jesus like he was an undesirable Lazarus. So stop judging people upon appearances. Stop expecting people to live up to your expectations or to do your bidding. Just love them. And if you do that, you will have overcome the world. You don't have to be a crumb anymore. and God wins. And that's the victory. Love wins, so we need to start living into it. So what would that look like? Well, that's the part that's up to you. And a more important question maybe is, what will you look like when you go through those doors this